Hi, welcome. Today I'd like to focus on the conversation between Nicki Minaj and Joe Budden. I really found it fascinating and hearing her perspective as an artist, and she was very insightful. So I thought it would be fun to speak on it because she really talks a lot about her experience as an artist and how she had creative blocks, how she overcame it, things like that. And on my channel, I'm all about cultivating the artist that is within you, meaning natural born artists, those of us who we know we have an artistic talent, we have that gift, and we enjoy expressing it and sharing it with the world, right? So I speak a lot about self-awareness because it's so important to understand who you are and know where you are in your journey in order to fully express more of your gift. So in the conversation, she really mentioned the impact of the hip hop culture on the Black community regarding like the women's image. She spoke about her experience and what is a popular image for a woman to have and how she felt the need to have that same image. And this is something I feel is definitely important to talk about because this is the hip hop culture, the music is very influential in our communities, and if we are desiring to make change, we have to consider the future generations and what they see. And obviously we may hear the problems that we're seeing, so we have to start looking at what we can do. And the reality is that music, the hip hop culture, has always had such a stronghold on the majority, like our image in general. That's what most of us see. And of course, this is not everybody. There's always small percentages who have differing experiences, but overall, I'd say our image as a community is widely influenced by the hip hop culture. So this is very important to talk about. And the struggle with women's image and the need to look the part, so to speak, to look desirable to the opposite sex. And so as young girls, this is something that will, whether it's conscious or subconscious, it goes in your psyche. You start to reference certain images as beautiful, right? So I think that as we get older, it is up to the elders, it's up to those of us who are able to reach the generation after us to be able to kind of, look out for the future. And especially if you're a parent like I am, it's like, how do we want to see the future for our children? And then what can we do about it? So these are conversations that are good to have, right? And so Nicki Minaj also pointed out the power position of the artist as being a role model to their fans. Whether they intend to do that or not, it comes with that role, like that. It comes with that position. when you are in front of so many people, right? And those fans, they begin to follow the lyrics, they will have the song on repeat. And of course, I've done this before, so many of us have, right? When we have a favorite song, you may put it on repeat, and then throughout the day you find that you're singing the words, you've memorized them, right? And she mentions how it's programming, right? And this is just a fact. It's literally like programming your mind, and you are more inclined to act it out, right? So we have to really recognize, the science behind all of this stuff, so that we can be aware, and then we can make conscious decisions for better outcomes. And so I always like to mention, well, in particular, when I was working more so with my clients, and being a consultant for artists specifically, I mentioned how I love to work with artists because I recognize the power in being a creator. And the fact is it is a position of influence, because you're creating narratives, right? These rappers, singers, they're singing about specific things, and it's a narrative. It's creating a story, and it's an image. It's a character they're portraying. And so the fan, their listeners, they may start to emulate that. That's a pretty powerful position as a creator, because again, if we band together, we can change that narrative, and hopefully, right, the goal would be to have a new outcome for our community as a whole. So I feel as though the artists have very powerful roles to play, and it's a huge responsibility as well. So I also like the fact of her mentioning there's apparently a court case regarding the dangerous impact of certain types of lyrics, like that reference drug use and weapons and things like that. And she wasn't very happy about it being possibly banned, because she felt as though, well, what about the movies? And she was comparing the two to where it's like, well, why can't they express themselves in the music, when in the other art form of like making a movie, they're not being accused that, it's causing somebody to copy the movie. So, it was kind of a good point. But what I realize is that we still need to see it for what it is. See, a movie we know is fictional unless it's stated otherwise, right? But the music is supposed to be fact, like it's supposed to represent that rapper's life. Like most of us are going to believe that it's true. They're singing or rapping about their experience, right? So there is a bit of a difference there. And if someone is listening to a rapper talking about what they would do and how they do certain things, and that person sees them as successful, like that's the outcome, they may follow the same path. That's just a reality. And so, not to say that someone can't copy a movie, but it's just different when you're watching something that is fictional compared to listening to something that is like supposed to be or known as a true story. And also with music, it's played more often than a movie. You can put a song on repeat, but you're not necessarily going to put the same movie on repeat, right? So the other thing I thought was perhaps a possible solution could be that the artists identify the song as fictional, or if it's based on true events, So maybe then it's kind of like a warning, letting the listener know. So that way it kind of goes in their mind. They're knowing that this is just art. This is just an expression. And the next thing she compared, rap to was rock and roll. She was talking about the difference and how, the black music is always being paired with like crime and that type of image. But, the rock and roll, they also use drugs and things like that. And, Joe did mention, he mentioned how it's just different. The cultures are different, which is true. It's just a fact, our community, once we do something repetitively, it just becomes part of the culture, right? Like that's what makes it culture. It's something that we're doing all the time, and we get known for a particular image. So the reality is that most rappers do mention guns, using guns, as a way to solve a problem or present it as a threat to their enemy. There's most times some type of reference to violence. And so we have to be honest about that impact it has, especially when we know that it is programming the mind as we listen to it on repeat, talking about harming somebody else. So if it is not literal, and if it's simply an artistic expression like a metaphor, for example, then that education is necessary for the average listener, because they may just receive the message differently. They're not going to know, hey, this is just art. They're going to take it serious, and you hear something enough times, again, you naturally start to act it out. And so that would be something that would be needed. Like I said, that education as to the difference between this being real and just art. So I think a party song, going back to like the rock and roll, party song about drugs may be more similar to the rock and roll version, but rap is known to mention certain subjects, and we need to be aware of why it's so impactful, and so again, noticing how influential hip-hop culture is and how the rap culture is on the community as a whole, most especially a certain generation like our young people, then once we realize that, then we can do something about it and change that narrative, because the power of a melody and that lyric on repeat, it is so powerful. It needs to be acknowledged, especially when that is the only feel good thing in that community. They basically become like affirmations. So we have to think of doing something to change that, or putting more positive affirmations, a way to instill it in different ways. And there are good music, there are good rappers out there, right? But predominantly, I think we must recognize the talk about, drugs and sex and violence as being widely heard and talked about. So the next thing she mentioned was the importance of living life, like having experiences with your loved ones, especially as an artist, because that's what you write about. And I thought that was so true. It's so important to, because you can be more authentic when you are drawing from something that you've actually experienced. It's just more, it has more heart to it. It's more real in comparison to, as she said, rap today. They don't talk about anything. And that's the very reason, because if no one is living life and actually going through this different experiences, well, there's nothing to really talk about. So it's so true. And she mentioned the importance of remembering to be present, remembering to experience the moment. And see, again, this comes down to being able to, you're pretty much like gathering more data. You can pull from more things as an artist when you are experiencing more. If you're noticing you're having like a blockage or trouble getting inspiration in some way, a lot of times we have to do something new. So yeah, experiences definitely help in that way. And she mentioned to not force yourself to like put out art just because of like something outside of you trying to convince you. Like for her, it was based on like an award show, trying to just hurry up and get something ready because of when the award show was going to be on. And it's something to really take a note of, because as an artist, we've all experienced the difference between something being created organically versus it's just like you're forcing it, and it's just not as impactful. The naturally flowing art, those are the best pieces. And she really spoke so much about being present, and you can see that her becoming a mother, 'cause she mentioned that too, how impactful that was in changing her outlook on life, and having to pause her career to focus on her baby. She had the desire to bond with her child, not just get right back to work. So that's something that most of us as women, we experience, because when you have that desire to have children and you also have that passion, right? And so you begin to learn how to balance those two things. So I really enjoyed hearing her experience in that way of having to just, hit the pause button for a moment, and it's actually really a privilege to be able to do that. And so now, she has that urge, she has the urge to get back out there, or at that time that, she was just coming back. She said she experienced some writer's block during the pregnancy, actually. And it was, because as a new mom, she was just so focused on the baby and being safe. And it was during COVID. So it was a lot going on. And so as artists, again, that's something we can relate to, right? when you're going through stressful times, it can be causing that blockage. Like, it's not the same, like it's not flowing the same, because all of our energy is on this other thing that we're worried about, right? So it acts as a block to that flow. So she couldn't write, she felt she couldn't write like before. So she had to try to figure out a way to get back out there. She tried to get on a track with Drake and Lil Wayne. And of course, that was a lot of pressure because they're obviously so successful. So it challenged her. And she realized, it was a good thing, and it helped her actually finally get rid of that block and get back out there. So she realized that that's how she operates, so it's good to know what works for you, and being aware of that so that you can use it as a tool when you find that you're in one of those places of being stuck. And so in that position, of course, she got a lot of different people talking. You're going to get a lot of chatter, right? A lot of people trying to give advice and say what you should do. And one thing she mentioned was she did not want to lower the bar, so to speak, just because she's a female rapper. She didn't want to just go with the trend and just say anything. She mentioned the importance of having a technique. So it's something to really pay attention to, right? Because it's easy to just do what everybody else is doing because you want to kind of be seen and heard. But to really stick with what you know and what you're good at, that really takes courage. And what she said, anytime a sound works, people just forget everything about who they are and jump on that sound. And so she and she recognized what every female rapper, what they were all doing. And it was very, extremely explicit stuff. And, she didn't want to follow that. And she was saying she just wouldn't feel good about herself. She got to do her. And, when you follow the trend and listen to other people's direction on what's hot, and she says, doing that, if you do that just a couple of times, after a while you forget who you are and become faceless. It's really interesting because it's true, because you kind of forget why you even started, and your passion in it, your purpose, because of you're losing focus. And she mentions you begin to lose your own identity because of the desire to hurry up and speed up the process, for that quick hit, and so these are all important lessons that she experienced that I think we can take and learn from, of course, in different degrees, because the industry is obviously going to be different from, say, those of us who are just in our day-to-day, day-to-day lives, doing other tasks. And so she really did a great job on expressing that experience. The next question that I liked that Joe Budden asked was was about how she was able to avoid any type of boredom in creating, right? And I think we can relate. There are those times to where you kind of lose that inspiration and it gets kind of, you get a little stuck, right? And so, she talks about being hard on herself and making sure that integrity, she sticks to integrity, being in her work and having standards, things like that. It seemed to kind of guide her way of creating. And I would agree. When you know who you are, you can maneuver, you can do things the way you know you need to, because that's the best way. That's the best way to create as an artist. You got to be true to who you are and allow yourself to go through that natural process. And really, it is perfect for avoiding that boredom, because it's so fun. Like, if you are familiar with that experience, then you know what I'm talking about. Like, it just makes me come alive, like, oh, it's the best thing ever, so really, yeah, again, knowing who you are, being true to yourself, your craft, what you're good at, what you're good at, and trusting the process. And the next thing she talked about was which was a great point about how great artists are remembered, specifically rappers, of course, she's talking about. And she's like, she was like, it's not based on like how many number one hits that you have. And, in the hip hop culture, it's about the technique. And she says, it's not even just about like metaphors. There are still so many different rappers who have their own unique technique. And so you don't have to try to worry about trying to get the number one song, trying to just follow a trend and you're changing up, and nobody can remember you. It's about having a technique and being authentic. I thought that was such a great point. She talks again about our community, the Black community as a whole, and how a lot of times we have to dim ourselves down. Like you feel like there are times where sometimes you can't talk too much about your accomplishments, because the other person might, she thinks she all that, that type of that type of vibe. And it's unfortunate. It's definitely out there. But Joe Budden, he does mention, that's why it's important to give himself his own props, and so that's so true. We gotta just know for ourselves, right? Know that we are gifted, that we doing our thing. Like, we gotta have that positive self-talk, because there may be people outside of us who they not gonna do it. We can't expect that, and then allow that to determine how we feel about our own work. So yeah. The main point she stressed was how powerful we are as a community, how influential we are as Black people, and how it's important for you, like each individual, like getting comfortable with mentioning your own influence, because she says, the industry, they'll just erase you. Like, if you don't speak up on it, they attribute it to somebody else, like non-Black. And then before you know it, like, they forgot all about you. And so, yeah, so this is something to really, to make note of, so that we do get the proper acknowledgement, most especially when it is a positive image, something that is positively portrayed as it relates to our people. So I think that it is important to support each other in that way. And that's really how we can begin to progress as a community. So, Joe also mentioned, he mentioned again regarding the influence and the fact that influence, period, is powerful, and that we as a community, we have a lot of influence when it comes to different trends and, even spending our money, how we're spending our money. We have a lot of power in that way. And so if we can use that correctly, it can help us. So there was another point that she mentioned about playing on your strengths and to own the space that you're in. And that's advice that she would tell some other women, because she realizes certain opportunities that she may have lost, especially when, you are at a height, really high moment in your career, for example. She mentions about really using those opportunities. And so the last one of the last questions that she was asked is about making progress towards change, for our grandchildren, for the future. And she was then making a point about those who are in power, even mentioning Joe Budden, his position, and just being able to use your voice, speak up for things that are right, and be able to acknowledge someone else when they're doing the right thing. And so when those people in those positions of power and great influence do that, of course, then others around, it really shifts their perspective. They're more open to receiving that information. And the fact she mentions about she does that with herself first. She figured that you got to start doing it yourself. Be willing to stand for the truth, speak up and show that we are important to each other by, standing up for someone that is in the right, and something they've been wronged, you speak up. And this the last point, is again talking about the power, the influence of music. And when it's on repeat, something that's repetitive, it's conditioning. It's conditioning the mind. And something they talked about was, even if the song is bad, you hear it so many times, you might find you start to like it. That's how powerful conditioning can be, right? So we need to really, again, make a note of what is going on, be aware of what is taking place in our environment, and take control of it. Use it for our benefit. It can still be something, enjoyable and as an art expression, but to actually begin to acknowledge the type of message that is being sent out. And I will say I was a bit surprised with the new music that she has produced. It seems a little off, if not all the way off from her message in this interview, because it does still reference some, you know, sort of violence. And I know she's, starting, she wants to be into movies, doing this type of work. But I did find it a bit surprising to have heard this message, and then I decided to let me see, well, what is she putting out now? And her new songs, again, they reference a lot of the stuff that she claims others are doing. And again, going back to some of the lyrics about how what is she really saying here, and what is the influence that she's portraying. So there was a bit of some inconsistency there. But again, aside from that, it sounds good. The things she said, and being more aware of her position, and wanting the community to come together, and being able to use our power in a strategic way, things like that. Yeah, it sounds good. But again, what are we choosing to do as individuals? So there's still some work to be done. But I just wanted to come on here and share some of the points I really thought were great. And I think as artists, we can really take note of and remember, when you are in that position of being a creator, you have a responsibility to your audience, and you have to decide what type of world do you want to live in? What type of world do you want your children and grandchildren to live in? And we start now, put out the proper messages right now. And if we are going to do something that is a little out of the ordinary, make sure that it's clearly stated that this is an expression. This is not something that we're advising you to do, especially when it comes to something that's along the lines of violence. So, yeah, there just needs to be some awareness and responsibility on our part. So, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you next time.